Hi, this is Roger in Finland, and today we're talking about the Blackmagic Design micro cinema camera. And there are kind of two different ways of looking at it. One is, it is a true cinema camera, it is cube shaped, it's ready for you to rig. It shoots Cinema DNG RAW and Cinema DNG RAW 3:1 compressed internally into an SD card with a really nice dynamic range, with a legendary sensor and excellent, very filmic image quality. Or you can look at it at, this is a pretty old camera, it doesn't even have a screen, the buttons are not enough and really tiny, the sensor is minuscule, it's smaller than a 1-inch sensor, it's only a 1080p camera, it's only 2 megapixels, there's only one aspect ratio, and it just goes up to 60p. And depending on what RAW you choose, would be your answer for, is this worth in 2024? And honestly, probably not for most people, but for me, there's two aspects that I think that it's worth. It's really fun, and the image looks really good. Intermission. There's one important feature that I forgot to mention, and it's the fact that it has a micro four thirds active mode. First is micro four thirds. There's a lot of native lenses. You can adapt almost anything to it. So that's definitely a plus. And is it active? And it is active, which means that you can control the aperture of the lenses from the camera itself. It will power the focus by wire of many of the native lenses, and it will activate the stabilization of those lenses which are stabilized. And one thing to remember is that the stabilization will only activate while recording, not while just framing, so to save some more battery. And if you're wondering, it's the end of April. Happy spring. Let's go back indoors. I mentioned the sensor. It has kind of a mythical and mystical following at this point almost. It is the same sensor that is found in the original Blackmagic pocket cinema camera that really has a strong following. It's Super 16, and in some websites it's been described as true digital Super 16 film video type of sensor. I think it was made by Fairchild, and again, you'll be the judge of the filmic qualities. Probably I'm butchering the color grade, so that's my fault. But if you look at the YouTubes and the internets and you find people that actually know what they're doing, you're gonna see a lot of quality and beautiful imagery coming out of this camera. I have one complaint though, and it's moire. That's something that you'll have to be aware of, and that's the reason why I'm redoing this video, because as you can see in here with my previous self from some hours or days or weeks ago, I'm not gonna even tell you when, it's pretty bad. But then, if the Pocket has that legendary status, why the micro cinema camera instead of the Pocket cinema camera? The Pocket cinema camera does have a screen, it does have more buttons, but that screen is totally fixed, which is understandable, but there are very few situations where I could see myself having that screen as a usable screen for framing or whatever it is, so I would need a monitor anyway. If I'm gonna need a monitor anyway, I would very much rather prefer the full HDMI connector from the micro compared to the flimsy that we know it will break micro HDMI from the Pocket. The second reason is battery life. The Pocket cinema camera, let's call it the Pocket, it uses really tiny Nikon batteries, I believe they are, and it's known to last for 15 to 20 minutes with just one battery, which is borders ridiculous. But the micro cinema camera, it uses the Canon LPE6, which are definitely ubiquitous. I already had 5 lying around at home, so that was easy to power. And even with this combo, with this Portkeys small monitor, I just use these LPE6s, and at least one battery is gonna last me for well over an hour for both devices, and that's more than good enough for what I do. And a feature that you get in the micro that you don't get in the Pocket is that it shoots 60p, if that's something you are into. One thing that it shares with the Pocket is how picky it is with SD cards. But fortunately, this Kingston Campus Select Plus work perfectly fine with no issues at all, recording with Cinema DNG RAW in the micro and also in the Pocket, and they can be found really cheaply in Amazon, much cheaper than many other cards, so problem solved. Then I did mention the tiny buttons, which you probably need to use your nails to push, but still they are usable, and they let you navigate through the menus and through the playback just fine. But the thing that I dislike the most of this camera is probably the expansion port with this tentacle looking multi-connector thingy that you can do many things, but I would have only one use, which is plugging this into an outlet instead of using a battery, like right now for situations like this, or if you would be using it for streaming via a capture card or something like that. But you need to use one of these multiple connectors on this old silly looking expansion port. I would say that the G2 Studio camera that now has a dedicated power input for it, that's a much better solution. It also has USB-C, which solves some other issues, including streaming and being able to record into an SSD. So that's I would say, a worthy kind of successor of both the micro cinema camera and the micro studio camera. And then the Super 16 sensor. I will not call this a drawback of this camera because it's one of its features. If you go for the Super 16 look, and by that I mean what kind of field of view you get with what kind of lenses, and that impacts also the depth of field, that's something that you choose this camera for that particular purpose and that particular look. From a crop factor and equivalency perspective, it has a 2.88 crop factor compared to what we call today full frame. And that means in practice, and for instance, the lens that right now it's mounted on the camera, that's a Laowa 17mm f2.8. Effectively, from a field of view perspective, it becomes a 50mm, nifty 50 at that. And with all that said, the thing which is most amazing, and I think that the main reason why many of us are going to try either this camera or the Pocket, is that it shoots true RAW. And that's something that we're not used to. We're shooting log with good codecs in many other cameras, but actual RAW, that's awesome. It's rawer than B-RAW, and you have quite a lot of room in the DaVinci Resolve camera RAW tab to adjust things. And the one thing, because of my inexperience, that I had to wrap my head around is ISO, because you can change the ISO values afterwards. And then I question myself, what's the point of setting the ISO in the camera then, if you can change it afterwards? Well, the point is, how do you expose? The base ISO for this camera is 800, which means that you should be getting the best dynamic range and the best results, given that the exposure is appropriate for that ISO level, which means that now that's what it's set at ISO 800. I expose then accordingly to that ISO. But if I would need to change it afterwards in post, I could do that because it's true RAW. And then of course I mentioned the Pocket a few times. I don't have one. I will not get one because they are coming more expensive than the Micro, to the point that it's not reasonable just for fun to get two of almost the same sensor size cameras. But what else do we have there? I would say that there's maybe two cameras that I would consider somewhat competitors, and it's an unfair competition really. First one would be the Blackmagic Design Micro Studio Camera G2, which has been released just in the end of 2023, which means that you can only find it new. And in practice, it also means that it's more than double the price of what this one is going to cost you right now, because you can only find them in second hand, and they go for usually less than 500 bucks. However, that Studio 2 is a 4K camera with a bigger sensor. It's micro four thirds sized. It's actually the same sensor than the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. To some, that will mean that it does not have the same mythical, magical, mystical qualities than this fragile sensor, but again, it's better at more, and it has a different field of view and a different feel, and it's a 4K sensor, so that might be for you. And then it can record into SSDs. It does record B-RAW, which you might prefer to the Cinema DNG. It does not record internally to any type of cards, so it's only via the USB, and then it has that connector for being plugged into the wall, which is pretty nice. Same size, more features, that sounds appealing. The other possible comparable alternative is this Cam E2C, and I say that it's an alternative because it's also smaller than micro four thirds sensor. It's also a small cubed camera, and that's about it. That's what things they have in common. The crop factor is a bit different, so it's 2.88 for the micro cinema camera, it's 2.3 for the Cam E2C. The E2C shoots in 4K, but internally into an SD card, it can only record in H.264 and H.265. If you want to record to ProRes, you can do that via USB-C into an SSD. You do not get SSD option in the micro, but in the micro, you get actual Cinema DNG RAW and ProRes into the SD card, but with a smaller sensor and less resolution. They're a bit different. The E2C has also several options for different aspect ratios. The micro is just 16:9. But they are both cube cameras, they are both small. I own them both, so I will be making a comparison video at some point. But then once again, now it's 2024, we are at the age of 8K, we are at the age of AI-powered autofocus systems, we are at the age of 6 stops of in-body image stabilization in cameras, we're at the age of full frame for the masses. What's the point of this tiny thing? Well, the main point is it's tiny, it's fun, it's at the price point at this very moment, second hand, that you can afford it as a fun thing to try because it has a micro four thirds mount. Quite likelihood many of you have plenty of either lenses or adapters to put really good and nice lenses on this camera, and you get the experience of shooting with true RAW, and you might not come back from that. So a lot of fun coming up. Definitely I'll be trying with different lenses. I really look forward to put the Blazer Remus 45mm anamorphic onto this camera and get some RAW anamorphic stuff, even though we're gonna lose the funkiness of the corners because of the crop, but still lots of fun coming up. What I'm interested is in, do you own one of these? Has it been long? Do you still have it? Are you considering now maybe the Pocket Cinema, the original one? But now, would you choose the Pocket or would you choose the Micro? I'm curious, what are you gonna do next? And hopefully you enjoyed this video at some point at least. If you did, please like and subscribe, and we're gonna see you soon for some more content.